at my 39th birthday party. My husband stood up, lifted his crystal glass, and ended our marriage in front of 200 people. By the time dessert should have been served, he no longer had a company, a board seat, or a reputation. My name is Claire Hudson. On paper, I was the perfect CEO's wife, quiet, polished, and always standing 3 steps behind my husband, Daniel Hudson, the golden boy of Hudson Dynamics. In reality, I was the woman who had built half of his empire in the shadows. He forgot that part when he decided to use my birthday toast to humiliate me. He remembered it when the board he assumed was loyal to him raised their hands to vote him out, while the creme brulee was still setting in the kitchen. The birthday toast, that wasn't about me. The party was Daniel's idea. 39 is basically 40. He joked, kissing my cheek in the elevator weeks earlier. We should start the celebrations early. Big. Make it a night to remember. He said it like it was about me, but it was always about him. The hotel ballroom glittered the way only money can make a room glitter. Chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting golden light over tables set with white linen and too many forks. The Hudson Dynamics logo glowed discreetly on one wall, as if reminding everyone who was paying for the spectacle. Investors, board members, influencers, our so-called friends. I sat at the center table in a red silk dress Daniel had picked for me by sending a stylist with his credit card and the instruction, make her look like the woman a Fortune 500 CEO should be married to. My hair was smoothed into place, my makeup flawless, my smile rehearsed. I watched him work the room. He was in his element, tall, athletic, perfectly tailored midnight blue suit. Laugh just loud enough. Eye contact just intense enough. He moved from table to table, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, dropping names. He'd built Hudson Dynamics, a logistics software company that ate smaller competitors for breakfast, from a scrappy startup in our garage into a corporation that graced magazine covers. People said he was a genius. They were half right. He was smart, but he was also lucky. And he also had me. At 8:45 p.m., the lights dimmed slightly. The band stopped mid-song. The event coordinator, headset askew, bustled to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, she gushed. If I could have your attention, please. Tonight, we're not just celebrating another successful year for Hudson Dynamics. We're celebrating the woman behind the man. Please raise your glasses for the birthday girl, Claire Hudson. Polite applause. I smiled, waved, felt my stomach twist. Daniel took the microphone from her with a gracious nod. Thank you, Jenna, he said. You'll make me blush. Laughter. He turned to me, eyes sparkling. Claire, he said, my wife, my partner, my better half. My cheeks warmed, though I knew better than to trust his stage voice. The mother of my children, he added. We did not have children. A few heads turned. He grinned. I'm kidding, he said. Yet. Relieved laughter. He let it ripple through the room before continuing. When I met Claire 16 years ago, he said, I was just a guy with a half-broken laptop and a PowerPoint deck no one wanted to see. She saw something in me before anyone else did. A genuine line. True, even. He glanced at me. For a moment, I hoped he might actually make this about gratitude. About the nights I'd stayed up debugging code. About the contracts I'd revised. About the angel investor who'd only agreed to meet because I'd once babysat his twins and still sent them birthday cards. But Daniel never met a spotlight he didn't want to twist. But as amazing as Claire is, he said, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly, we all know she's not exactly built for the boardroom. A murmur. My smile froze. She hates numbers, he went on lightly. She gets dizzy if someone says, EBITDA. Polite chuckles. She's happiest planning charity galas and picking out curtains, he said. And that's okay. Not everyone is wired for high-stakes business. I stared at my hands. It was an old joke, one he'd made before, in smaller rooms. This time, the audience was bigger. So was the damage. If you could see the look on her face when I talk about acquisitions, he said, miming a blank stare. It's adorable. Laughter. Louder this time. He was warming up. And that's why, he said, voice dropping into that mock-serious tone he used when announcing new products. Tonight, I want to talk not just about her as my wife, but about evolving roles. A weird tension rippled through the room. My spine prickled. I've been thinking a lot, he said, pacing a step, about where we are as a company, as a family, about who's carrying which loads. He looked at me again, eyes glittering. And I've come to a conclusion, he said. Claire deserves a lighter one. He paused. This year, he said, Claire will be stepping down from any formal involvement with Hudson Dynamics. No more advising on deals. No more showing up at board meetings. Another chuckle. No more stress about things she's not equipped to handle. She'll be free to focus on what she does best, being the perfect hostess and my support system at home. The words hit me like a slap I was expected to smile through. Stepping down from a role that didn't exist on paper, maybe, but one I had given my 20s and 30s to, the room reacted, some with relieved nods. Ah, finally, the CEO's wife will stay in the wife lane. Some with surprise, those who knew how often he'd leaned on my insights. Some with awkward glances at me. He raised his glass. To Claire, he said, may she always know her place is by my side, not in front of a spreadsheet. The insult was wrapped in velvet, but it was still an insult. He'd chosen my birthday, in a room full of colleagues, friends, and press, to announce that I was being retired from the company I'd helped build and boxed back into the role of ornamental spouse. He thought I'd laugh it off, play along. He didn't know that 2 days earlier, I had discovered something that made his toast feel less like a humiliation and more like a gift. Because 2 days before my birthday, a junior analyst in finance, someone Daniel barely knew existed, had forwarded me a file by mistake. A file that revealed his empire was held up by fraud, and that my name conveniently never appeared on any of it. How I built the empire he claimed alone. When Daniel and I met, Hudson Dynamics was a PowerPoint and a dream. He'd been my brother's college roommate. They graduated the same year, my brother into a respectable engineering job, Daniel into the gig economy, piecing together contract work and pitch meetings. He's brilliant, my brother had said. Terrible at follow-through, but brilliant. I'd been 23 then, fresh out of an MBA program, working as an analyst at a dull but steady insurance firm. Daniel was charismatic in a way most of the men in my department were not. He talked about optimization and disruption and changing the way goods move around the world. I talked about risk models and capital structures. We met at my brother's birthday party in my parents' backyard. He was holding court by the grill, telling a story about a shipping company that lost millions because someone mistyped a port code. Humans are the weakest link in logistics, he'd said. Software can fix that. We just have to build it. People still have to use the software, I pointed out, stepping into the conversation. Humans make the buying decisions. They have to believe they need what you're selling. He turned, surprised. And you are, he'd asked, the one who actually knows how to read a balance sheet. I'd replied. He'd grinned. We sparred all evening. 2 months later, we moved into a tiny apartment together. 6 months after that, we filed the incorporation papers for Hudson Dynamics. He had the technical vision. I had the spreadsheets. He coded. I pitched. When his demos crashed, I soothed investors with clear road maps and carefully projected returns. When my detailed decks put people to sleep, he jumped in with analogies and jokes. We were a team. For the first few years, we were also broke. We lived on my salary. He poured every dollar the company made back into servers, engineers, and trade show booths we couldn't afford. I maxed out 2 credit cards to keep us afloat, telling myself, it's an investment. It'll pay off. It did. On paper. The first big break came when a mid-size freight company adopted our system and saw a 20% efficiency increase in 6 months. They raved. Others listened. Within 5 years, we'd landed 3 major contracts. Within 10, Hudson Dynamics was the industry darling. Magazines wrote glowing profiles of self-made genius Daniel Hudson. Photos of him in glass offices and on factory floors appeared everywhere. The captions mentioned his supportive wife Claire in passing. I didn't mind. Not at first. I hated being in front of cameras. I liked being in the room where decisions were made, not on the magazine page about them. What I minded was when the narrative in those rooms started to shift, too. At first, Daniel would say things like, Claire, and I think. Claire pointed out. Claire's analysis shows. Then, gradually, I came up with. I realized I've always believed. I'd call him on it. Later, over takeout on the couch. You forgot to mention me. I'd say lightly. He'd wave a hand. They know, Claire. He'd reply. Besides, we're a team. What's mine is yours. What's mine is yours. I'd echo, trying to believe it. When the company went public, that phrase started sounding thinner. Our equity converted into shares. His name was on the majority. So was mine, smaller but significant. At the insistence of our lawyers, we'd signed a post-nuptial agreement before the IPO. Standard risk management. They'd said, if the marriage failed, the company wouldn't implode with it. We'll never need this, Daniel had said, signing with a flourish. But sure, whatever makes the board happy. The agreement acknowledged my contributions. Explicitly, it granted me a share of any future value. As long as my stock holdings remained intact, I had power. Power I rarely flexed. I attended board meetings at first, sat at one end of the table, quiet, absorbing. Occasionally, I'd ask a question that made people shift in their seats. Why are we so concentrated in one region? What's our backup plan if that vendor fails? What percentage of this acquisition's revenue is actually recurring versus one time? Some directors appreciated it. Some resented it. Daniel started making jokes. Careful, my wife's in the room. She'll find the hole in your model before lunch. People laughed. I smiled. But over time, the invitations slowed. Too much on your plate, he'd say. Focus on the charitable foundation. The optics are great, and you're good at that. He wasn't wrong. I was good at it. I built the Hudson Foundation from a vague idea into a credible entity that funded STEM programs in underfunded schools. I sat on panels, spoke at galas, was quoted in press releases. Claire Hudson, philanthropist, the byline said, rarely co-founder of Hudson Dynamics. That omission stung more than I wanted to admit. Still, I told myself, we're fine. The company is doing well. The house is paid off. We have options. I ignored small things, like how Daniel started spending more time on the road than at home, how he came back from trips with new watches, how he called our city penthouse base camp instead of home, how often he used the pronoun I in earnings calls. The first real crack appeared not in our marriage, but in our numbers. I just didn't recognize it for what it was until an Excel file landed in my inbox 2 days before my birthday. 3. The file. You weren't supposed to see this. It was late. I was in my home office, going through my usual ritual of clearing non-urgent emails before logging off. Most were boring. Charity updates, PR approvals, a friendly reminder from the event planner about the guest list for the birthday party, I already regretted agreeing to. Then, a subject line. Q4 consolidated. Internal only. It came from a junior analyst in finance, Priya Singh, with a brief note. As requested, please let me know if you have questions. I stared at it. I had made no such request. Not recently, anyway, but curiosity and old habits got the better of me. I opened the attachment. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Revenue, expenses, region breakdowns. I'd seen 1,000 spreadsheets like it. I almost closed it. Then something caught my eye. A line item under other income. Consulting fees. Large ones. Paid to an entity I didn't recognize. Atlas Solutions, LLC. I scrolled. Atlas Solutions appeared in multiple tabs. EMEA, APAC, North America, tens of millions flowing in and out over the past 3 years. Fees just below thresholds that would trigger certain internal approvals. My pulse quickened. I checked the vendor master file. Atlas Solutions was listed as a strategic partner providing specialized integration services. I'd never heard of it. Maybe I'd just been out of the loop too long. Maybe it was a new arrangement, but something about the pattern felt wrong. The amounts, the timing, the regions. I closed the file, opened our public quarterly report, compared. Some of the Atlas-related income looked inflated, recognized earlier than I would have expected. Fudged is the ugly but accurate word. I had spent enough years in risk assessment to know what smoothing earnings looks like when a CEO wants to hit guidance at any cost. I felt sick. I forwarded the email back to Priya, careful to keep my tone neutral. Hi Priya, I think you may have sent this file to me by mistake. Claire. Her reply came within minutes. Am so sorry, Mrs. Hudson. That was meant for Daniel. He asked me to pull together a special consolidated view. Please delete. Thank you. Special. My fingers hovered over the keys. No worries. Deleted. I lied. Then, instead of closing my laptop, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Ethan Price, our original outside counsel, the man who'd helped draft the post-nup and shepherded the IPO. He picked up on the second ring. Claire, he said, surprise in his voice. To what do I owe? I need to ask you a hypothetical question about vendor arrangements and revenue recognition. I blurted. There was a beat of silence. Is this hypothetical in the same way your questions about dilution were hypothetical in 2015? He asked dryly. Yes, I said, which is to say, not very. He sighed. All right, he said, tell me what you saw. I did, in as much detail as I could remember. He listened, did not interrupt. When I finished, he said one word. Damn. My throat was tight. What does it mean? I asked. Best case, he said. Aggressive accounting. Slap on the wrist. Some restatements. A few nasty articles. And worst case? I asked. Shell company. He said. Controlled by insiders. Money moving in circles to prop up stock price and line certain pockets. That's not just a governance issue. That's securities fraud. The air in the room seemed thinner. Could Daniel? I started, then stopped. Would Daniel? Claire, Ethan said gently. I don't know. CEOs under pressure do stupid things. Sometimes they convince themselves it's temporary, just until the next big deal. They call it managing expectations. Can they drag the whole board down? I asked. The company? Me. It depends who knows what, he said. If this Atlas entity is connected to Daniel personally, and he's been hiding it from the board, he's the primary exposure. But the longer it goes on, the harder it is for others to plead ignorance. I thought of the party, the toast, his smug certainty. What should I do? I whispered. First, Ethan said, Do not confront him alone. Not yet. Not before you understand the scope. He paused. Second, he continued, we need proof. Not screenshots. Not hearsay. Paper. Contracts. Bank records, if we can get them. And you need to protect yourself. You're a shareholder. A board adjacent. Insider, whether they like it or not. If this goes south, you want a record showing you tried to address it, not bury it. Address it how? I asked. There are proper channels, he said. Internal audit, the audit committee chair, the external auditors, and if necessary, the SEC. The letters made my head spin. I don't want to blow up his life. I said weakly. You didn't, Ethan said. He did, if this is what it looks like. You'd be trying to keep the crater from swallowing everyone else. I closed my eyes. Ethan, I said, he's my husband. And you're the co-founder whose name got erased from half the origin story. He replied, you're also the one who will be standing there when the music stops if this stays hidden. You can love him and still refuse to go to jail for him. It was a blunt sentence. It was also the one I needed. Okay, I said. What's first? Forward me the file. He said, quietly. I'll start tracing Atlas Solutions. In the meantime, act normal. Go to your party. Let him have his moment. We'll plan yours. His words echoed in my head as Daniel made his little performance about my place being nowhere near a spreadsheet. He didn't know then that my hands, soft, manicured, supposedly only good for charity galas, held the matchbox that could light up his carefully constructed image. He handed me the perfect stage. I decided to use it for the empire he thought he owned, the days between finding the file, and my birthday felt like walking on a wire above a canyon. I smiled when expected. I kissed Daniel goodbye when he flew to San Francisco. I nodded through party planning meetings with Jenna. In the gaps, I gathered information. Priya, terrified that she'd sent me confidential data, quietly provided a list of all payments to Atlas Solutions and the internal approval chains. Ethan dug into incorporation records. Atlas Solutions, LLC, registered in Delaware, of course. 2 managing members, a holding company, and an individual, D.H. Ventures Incorporated and Greystone Advisors. D.H. Ventures, Inc.'s sole shareholder, Daniel Hudson, Greystone Advisors principal, Gary Cole, an old college friend of Daniel's who'd shown up around the time we'd started entertaining bigger clients, always at Daniel's side. Layers of shell. Classic. Hudson Dynamics procurement policy required disclosing related party transactions. Disclosing. Daniel had not. The audit committee had signed off on clean statements based on what they were shown, not what they weren't. Is there any world in which this is legal? I'd asked Ethan, staring at the web of entities on his email. Not with that level of non-disclosure. He'd said, even if the consulting work were real, which I doubt, funneling company funds to your own private LLC without board knowledge is a violation of fiduciary duty at best, embezzlement at worst. He paused. And that's before we even get to the question of whether the revenue tied to these contracts actually exists. He'd added, if it doesn't, we're in Ponzi scheme territory. I felt nauseous. Has he taken enough to hurt the company? I asked. Not yet, Ethan said. But the longer it goes on, the worse the unwind. The good news for you and for innocent shareholders is that the core business is strong. The bad news for Daniel is that this side arrangement could take him down hard. I looked at my reflection in the laptop screen. The woman staring back at me looked more tired than I felt. What happens to me if this blows up? I asked. To my shares? To my name? That depends on how fast you move, he said. If you bring this to the audit committee before any public scandal, you can position yourself as a whistleblower, not an accomplice. And because you have no signatory authority on these entities, your exposure is limited. You have to be deliberate. Deliberate, not emotional, not impulsive. My instinct was to confront Daniel at home, slam the printed statements on the marble counter, and demand explanations. Instead, I did what I'd always done best. I made a plan. 5. The plan, turning a toast into a board coup. The audit committee chair was a woman named Margaret Ellis, a former CFO with a reputation for being both fair and utterly ruthless when it came to financial integrity. Daniel tolerated her because she'd been instrumental in getting us through the IPO with minimal drama. He disliked that she wasn't dazzled by him. I called her office the day before my party. Her assistant tried to give me an appointment 3 weeks out. It's about a potential undisclosed related party transaction involving the CEO, I said, keeping my voice low and even, and possibly overstated revenue. Silence. I'll put you through, the assistant said immediately. Margaret's voice came on the line. Claire, she said, to what do I owe this surprise? I have something you need to see, I said, and a strange request. Go on, she said. I outlined the basics. Atlas Solutions, D.H. Ventures, Greystone, Ethan's preliminary findings. I heard her pen scratching. I can't ignore this, she said when I finished. But going straight to the general counsel might tip Daniel off and give him time to cover tracks. What did you have in mind? Tomorrow night, I said, almost the entire board will be in one room. So will external counsel. So will you. And so will I. She was quiet for a beat. You want a meeting? She said. Yes, I said. Before dessert. In the side conference room by the ballroom. 15 minutes. Just you, me, Ethan, and any independent directors you trust most not to leak. I'll bring the file. We can decide together whether to move forward. That is unconventional, she said. So is my husband using a shell company to siphon money from his own firm? I replied. She made a sound that might have been a smothered laugh. Point taken, she said. Send Ethan's preliminary report to my personal email. I'll review tonight. And Claire, yes, this will not be pretty, she said. If we find what you think we'll find, Daniel will be removed. Publicly, eventually. Privately, perhaps as soon as tomorrow. Are you prepared for that? I thought of his toast, of him declaring my place was at home, supporting his empire. I thought of the years of late nights, the compromises, the erasures. I thought of the Atlas file. Yes, I said, I am. Then we proceed, she said. 6. The birthday party as battlefield. As Daniel spoke into the microphone, painting me as the sweet but clueless wife being gently shuffled off the company stage, I sat still. I smiled when appropriate. I let the humiliation land. I let them see what he thought of me. It would make the contrast sharper later. When the toast ended, people turned to gauge my reaction. I clinked my glass against his and said into the mic. He thrust in my direction, well, at least you didn't announce I was being replaced. Nervous laughter. He kissed my cheek. She's a good sport, he said. That's why I married her. In that moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because what he didn't know was that my phone, in my clutch, had just sent a scheduled email to Margaret and Ethan, reminding them of our 9 p.m. dessert preview meeting in the side conference room. He also didn't know that the birthday cake Jenna had worked so hard on was going to be sliced and served without him at the table. Let's get the band playing again, he said, handing the mic to the singer. We'll dance my wife into her 40s. Music swelled. Guests drifted back to their conversations and their drinks. Daniel moved to the bar, where a cluster of executives surrounded him. I excused myself to touch up my makeup. In the corridor leading to the restrooms, Margaret was waiting. Nice party, she said drily. You heard the toast. I replied. Loud and clear, she said. Let's go. We slipped into the side conference room. Ethan was already there. So were two other independent directors Margaret trusted, Raj Patel and Linda Gomez. On the table lay printed copies of the Atlas documentation. "Happy birthday," Linda said wryly. "Hell of a way to celebrate." "Let's hope it's also the CEO's retirement party," Raj muttered. We sat. Margaret flipped through the file. "So," she said, eyes scanning line after line, "we have a vendor owned indirectly by our CEO, receiving suspiciously timed fees, without disclosure, tied to revenue that appears circular at best, fictitious at worst." "Correct," Ethan said. "And we have evidence that Daniel requested a special consolidated report that treats these flows differently from our audited statements, suggesting awareness of their sensitivity." "In plain English," Linda said, "he knows it's shady." "In plain English," Ethan said, "yes." Margaret looked at me. "You understand what we have to do," she said. "I do," I said. "We need to protect the company, and the innocent shareholders, and ourselves." "And you," Raj asked gently, "you're about to light a fuse under your own life." "My life," I said, "has been standing behind a man who thinks I'm an accessory. I can survive standing on my own." They exchanged glances. Margaret nodded. "Here's the plan," she said. "We quietly convene an emergency meeting of the independent directors, present these findings, and move to place Daniel on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. We inform general counsel and external auditors. Then, once we have enough to go to regulators, we self-report." "Timeline?" I asked. "As soon as we leave this room," she said. "The more time passes, the more risk there is he senses something and starts shredding." "And the party?" Ethan asked. She shrugged. "Dessert will have to go on without him," she said. I almost smiled. "At my birthday," I said. "He ended my role in the company with a toast. You're telling me before dessert we can end his empire with a vote?" Margaret's mouth twitched. "Empires built on lies tend to collapse quickly once someone pulls the right brick," she said. "Tonight, that might be you. The fall, by order of the board. You'd think something as dramatic as a CEO being removed at his wife's birthday party would come with shouting. It didn't. It happened in a small carpeted room with bad art on the walls and a carafe of lukewarm coffee on the sideboard. Margaret contacted the other independent directors via text, citing urgent compliance matter and immediate executive session. Within 15 minutes, 5 of them slipped into the conference room, one by one, faces puzzled. Ethan presented a succinct summary of the findings, careful not to exaggerate. Priya's accidental email, anonymized. The Atlas entity structure. The payments. The lack of disclosure. The special report request. Linda spoke to the pattern from an audit committee perspective. Raj spoke to corporate governance. I spoke briefly to my own role. That file was sent to me by mistake. I said, "I did not know about Atlas. I have not approved any such arrangements. I discovered this 2 days ago and immediately contacted outside counsel and the audit chair. They listened. Most of them were older, veterans of other boards, other scandals. They knew what this meant. This could destroy us," one muttered. "This could save us," Margaret countered. "If we handle it ourselves, quickly, we have a chance to contain the damage. If the SEC or the press discovers it first, we're done." "What about Daniel?" another asked. "He's the face of the company. The market loves him." "The market loves the returns he promised," Raj said. "If those are built on fraud, loving him won't matter much to the DOJ." Silence. Margaret straightened. "I move that we place Daniel Hudson on immediate paid administrative leave," she said, "effective tonight. That we strip him of decision-making authority while a special committee investigates, and that we empower that committee to engage independent forensic auditors and counsel." I second. Linda said they voted unanimous. Just like that, with scribbles on paper and a few murmured eyes, Daniel ceased to be the untouchable emperor of Hudson Dynamics. He didn't know it yet. He found out 10 minutes later when Margaret and Raj pulled him aside near the bar. I watched from across the room as his face went from confused to furious. He gestured widely. They stayed calm. After a minute, security, hotel, not ours, stepped closer. Not to manhandle him, just to be present. He saw them. He saw me. His eyes flared. He stormed over. "What did you do?" he hissed under his breath, teeth clenched in a parody of a smile for the cameras still lurking near the band. "Why don't we step outside?" I said calmly, surprising myself. He laughed, short and ugly. "Afraid I'll say something that ruins your party?" he sneered. "You've already done that," I replied. "Now, I'm just making sure you don't ruin the company too." His nostrils flared. "You think you're some kind of martyr?" he said. "You know what happens to our stock if this gets out? To our people, to you. I think I'm someone who remembers that the numbers under the headlines are real," I said, "and that lies have a way of surfacing, whether we want them to or not." He stepped closer. "After everything I built," he spat, "you're going to side with auditors and lawyers over your own husband?" "I'm going to side with the truth," I said, "because unlike you, I'm not willing to lose my soul to keep a stock chart pretty." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Then he smiled. It was a cold, calculating expression I'd seen him use on opponents, never on me. "You think you've won something here," he said. "You haven't. You've just attached your name to the fall. When I go down, I'll make sure you're dragged with me." That was when Ethan stepped up behind me. "As of 10 minutes ago," he said quietly, "you have no authority to speak for Hudson Dynamics. Any attempt to retaliate against Ms. Hudson for raising legitimate concerns will be noted and used accordingly. I suggest you speak to your lawyer before making threats you can't back up." Daniel glared at him, at me, at Margaret, who stood a few feet away, watchful. He straightened his jacket. "You'll hear from my counsel," he said. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft thud. Jenna, the event planner, hovered nervously. "Do we still serve dessert?" she asked. I almost laughed. "Yes," I said. "People came for food and a band. They should at least get that." She nodded, relieved to have something concrete to do. The band played on. The cake was cut. The guests whispered. Rumors started immediately. "Did you see him leaving? Was that security? Something's wrong." I didn't feed any of them. When people came up with pitying looks and vague comments, "Are you okay?" "Rough night, huh?" I smiled politely and said, "We'll be fine. Enjoy the dessert." By midnight, my marriage was effectively over. By the end of the quarter, Daniel was formally removed as CEO. By the end of the year, Hudson Dynamics announced a restatement of 3 years of earnings, a remediation plan, and a new leadership structure that included a co-CEO, Margaret, and a seasoned operator from outside. My shares dipped, then stabilized, then slowly recovered. Daniel's reputation did not. The SEC and DOJ did indeed come knocking. He settled one case, fought another, and lost. He did not go to prison, but he paid millions in fines and lost the right to serve as an officer or director at any public company for 10 years. He also lost the narrative. The press, once eager to paint him as a visionary, now called him another tech bro who thought the rules didn't apply. My name appeared too, but usually in a different context. Whistleblower wife, some said. Co-founder finally credited, said one surprisingly fair profile. My brother called after reading that one. "Told you he was terrible at follow-through," he said. I laughed until I cried. 8. After dessert, my life without his empire. Ending Daniel's empire before dessert did not magically fix my life. Divorce followed. Messy, predictable. He tried to argue that my role in the company had been symbolic. Our lawyers produced emails, early presentations, and that pesky post-nup that explicitly described my contributions. He tried to claim I'd sabotaged him for money. The regulators' timelines disproved that. He tried in quieter ways to guilt me, voicemails about destroying what we built, texts about leaving him when he needed me. I saved them. Then, on Ethan's advice, I blocked his number. We still share children, though in our case they are more like a company and a foundation than people. Hudson Dynamics remains a publicly traded entity. The Hudson Foundation continues to fund programs. My name is on more of their paperwork now, not because I demanded it, because people finally saw what had been there all along. I moved out of the penthouse. It was too full of things that felt like props. I bought a smaller apartment closer to the water, with my own money, with my own name on the deed. No co-signers, no shells. On my 40th birthday, a year after the party that detonated my old life, I had dinner with 4 people. My brother, Margaret, Linda, Ethan. We ate at a small restaurant with mismatched chairs and a view of the harbor. No logos on the walls. No photographers. No toasts meant to wound. At the end of the meal, my brother raised his glass. "To Claire," he said, "the only person I know who can get humiliated in a room full of executives and still walk out with the company instead of the man." I laughed. Margaret shook her head. "You didn't walk out with the company," she said. "You walked out with your integrity. The company was a bonus." Ethan added, "And you walked out before the ceiling collapsed." I raised my own glass. To Grandma Evelyn, I said suddenly. They looked confused. She used to say, "If someone shows you they're willing to burn down the house to stay warm, you better make sure you own the matches." I explained. They chuckled. I thought of Daniel, of the Atlas file, of his toast, of the way he tried to use my birthday, my role, my love, as a stage for his control. And I realized something that had taken me nearly 2 decades to admit. Ending his empire wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. If you're listening to this, and you feel like the supporting character in someone else's success story, especially someone who uses your loyalty as both ladder and leash, I hope my story nudges you to look a little closer at the numbers behind the narrative. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect yourself, even when it means someone you love faces consequences for what they chose. They might call it betrayal. They might stand in front of a room and make jokes about where you belong. Let them, because the truth is this: no one gets to end you with a toast, unless you choose to put down the glass and leave the table. Sometimes you leave quietly. Sometimes you leave after making a call in a side conference room that changes the minutes of a board meeting and the course of a company forever. Either way, the decision is yours. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and a little bit ruthless in the right ways, dessert tastes sweeter when you know that for once you didn't have to swallow what was put in front of you just because he told you it was all you deserved.